Thanks for listening to Niche Knowledge and Nonsense. I'm your co-host, Bailey Gauss.
And I'm Ethan Dixon, and this is our debut pilot episode.
Yeah, this is our very first episode. Kind of both really nervous about this, but we've been talking about doing it for like a year now. So.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. I think we've done a lot of background work. We've done everything except put voices to the tracks. So I'm excited to be on the horn with you right now.
Yeah, hey, me too. Basically, how this is going to work, our podcast is very similar to PowerPoint Party. If you're not familiar with that, it's where a group of friends looks up a designated topic and then they give a PowerPoint presentation to their friends and kind of just give them, information that they may not have known before.
The only thing that sets us apart from a PowerPoint party is the lack of a PowerPoint. But the presentation
is a PowerPoint for blind people.
Absolutely. We love bringing you entertainment in an audio format.
So, the very first episode of Niche Knowledge and Nonsense, we're going to be doing the history of mortuary science, which there was actually a lot of information to kind of unpack. So, it's going to touch a little bit on a couple different things. So, we're going to talk about the education and training required for people to become a mortician. We'll talk about the skills that they have to have. We're going to cover a tiny bit of embalming. I feel like there's so much that it could probably be its own episode. And then the history of how the funeral director title came to be. And I also want to give out my sources. The sources for this episode are funeralbasics.org, talkdeath.com, worldhistory.org, goldencharter.co.uk, the Smithsonian Magazine, and the Discovery Channel.
Man, Smithsonian seems really invested in this topic. I'm familiar with some of their work in the area. Mummies, I'm a big fan of those. The Mummy, Brendan Fraser. I'm not sure how closely affiliated he is with Smithsonian, but I'm a fan of his as well. And again, this is kind of a timely topic because, as we've discussed before, I think most people are dead. So most people have some experience with mortuary science, whether firsthand or otherwise. And hopefully, everyone out here isn't too close to the grave. But if you are, then this podcast might be for you.
It might be for you. This podcast can be for anybody who wants to listen or learn about anything. So whether you're dead or not.
Living or otherwise.
So mortuary science. This is a topic that has kind of made me feel like squeamish, but has really interested me for a long time. It's science, and in my opinion, it's also kind of like art.
Sure.
So we're going to dig into mortuary science and all of the other related things that I could find during my research. So to start off, mortuary science is the study of deceased bodies through mortuary work. The term is most often applied to a college curriculum in the United States that prepares a student for a career as a mortician or funeral director. Many also study embalming to supplement their mortuary science studies. Some states require funeral directors to be embalmers as well. So let's start by answering some basic questions. What is the difference between an embalmer and a mortician? Ethan, do you want to answer this, or you just want me to give you a...
Ooh, an embalmer or a mortician? I would guess there's an element to maybe like front of house, back of house staff that maybe, embalmer is dealing specifically with, the process of preserving a body, and then a mortician is I don't know, more like a religious role or a customer service role or something.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of close, like the front of house, back of house. So an embalmer is someone who prepares bodies for burial by sanitizing and preserving them. A mortician is someone who works with the bereaved, helps plan funerals, and oversees the burial process. While both occupations require deep respect for the dead, embalmers focus more on the science of death, while morticians focus more on the service aspect. Some funeral directors may also be embalmers, but not all funeral directors are embalmers.
Well,
which I thought was interesting because I kind of just always assumed that they were the same, but they're not.
for sure. And I don't know if maybe that's regional as well, because I am from a small town. In a small town, there are not too many, funeral services. So I'm sure you're more likely to have a mortician who's doing kind of a full stack development, maybe
Oh, yeah,
picking up the
especially
body,
like
preserving the
family-owned.
body. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, what's the difference between an undertaker and a funeral director? Any
Oh,
guesses?
undertaker, funeral director. I would guess maybe the funeral director is the boss. Maybe it's like a tiered authority thing, like a hierarchy.
Okay, I can see where you're kind of going with that logic. If you're dumb, I'm joking. I'm joking. No, you're not dumb.
I'm glad you're not serious. Please proceed.
Okay. The main difference between an undertaker and a funeral director is that a funeral director typically oversees all aspects of the funeral, from the planning stages to the actual service. In contrast, an undertaker is an American retired professional wrestler who was born on March 24th, 1965.
Did you do this?
Just kidding.
Okay. It's episode 1.
For real, though. For real, though, an undertaker typically focuses on the burial aspect of funerals, not all the planning stuff. Okay.
Glad he
You okay?
doesn't. Okay. Go on, go
All
on.
right. Can you have a funeral without a funeral director?
I'm gonna guess no on merit of that point being in there. Well,
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know because I think I anecdotally that there's got to be, I see a lot of like family graves, and I don't know if they're hiring a funeral director to like roll into the family grave plot, or if they're just like digging a hole and chucking them in there. So I'm gonna change my answer and say no.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, although you can technically have a funeral without a funeral director, it is not recommended. A funeral director can help ease the burden of organizing and executing a funeral and can provide valuable guidance in what can be a challenging and emotional time for most people. Unless you're glad they're dead. Right? Yeah. So we're gonna hop on over to the education and training part of mortuary science. So in the past, most morticians simply received on-the-job training through apprenticeships. However, to become a licensed professional mortician these days, you must earn at least an associate's degree in mortuary science. To enroll in a 2 years associate's degree program in mortuary science, you must either have a high school diploma or a GED. And in this case, GED stands for Glad Everyone Dies.
My God. Good for business, absolutely. So I'm already kind of taken aback. I always assumed that this was maybe a role that they have to like more or less beg people to do, or if it was like some kind of like state appointment that you had to put some time in the industry if you wanted to be like a coroner someday or something like that. So I'm kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised that there's some official barriers and thresholds that you have to hit.
Yeah. So, courses cover mortuary management, marketing, human anatomy, embalming, modern funeral practices, and coping with loss. With an associate's degree, you will be eligible for entry-level positions at funeral homes, mausoleums, and cemeteries. Many students choose to continue their education toward bachelor degree programs in mortuary science rather than seeking employment immediately. Additional requirements include the completion of an apprenticeship program lasting up to 3 years. In most states, you'll also need to earn a license before you can perform embalming services. This credentialing process typically entails passing a written exam after meeting all education, experience, and age requirements.
Again, I'm very, very glad that there is some certification and some like accreditation type stuff that goes into this, because I think this very easily in an alternate universe could have been like a portfolio based sort of career, kind of like when you first start out taking photos as a photographer, you're gonna be shooting some free gigs. And nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to go through the awkward gotta undertake some a few free corpses before you can make the big bucks.
They just have like punch cards.
Oh
Like
my
once you get up to 10, you
It's like, how do you prove it? Gotta take a selfie with the
my punch
corpse.
card's full.
You like that eyeshadow? I did that right there.
I did that, yeah.
It's my work.
Oh my God. Dear God. Okay. Students of mortuary science often report feeling the pressure of odd questions and looks from other college students. They are frequently shunned by other students and often find that they associate only with other mortuary science students. Regarding personal reactions, mortuary science students indicate a certain level of desensitization, as human bodies they work with become an impersonal, interconnected system of arteries and veins. While students often explain that their first experiences are the most difficult, they do become accustomed to the work, though the various odors are considered the worst element of the job. But I feel like that is kind of true for most like medical professionals, whether
Sure.
you're working in a nursing home or just at like a hospital somewhere. Um, because I have family who, someone in my family is a nurse, and the stuff that she has had to deal with is just absolutely insane. Like she worked in a psych ward for a couple years, and I remember her telling me the story of like one woman literally smeared poop in her hair,
Oh my
and then
gosh.
she had to help her wash it out.
Where'd she get the poop?
Just it was her own poop.
Jeez.
It was. I mean, she was working on the psych ward, and some of the people are really like going through it, and they're heavily medicated, and they're just they can't be trusted to be alone or whatnot. So they're like supposed to be on watch with them all the time. Like it's just crazy. I can't even imagine like because my kids, like when we were toilet training and stuff, I hated, like I don't mind cleaning up if you have like a pee accident,
Sure.
but like my son has shit on the floor in his bedroom like 3 times, which thankfully it's mostly hardwood
Oh my
floor,
gosh.
and then we just have like a rug in there.
Can you imagine a nice
But I'm
thick
like,
mohawk carpet just oh.
Okay, but I can't imagine, like I wouldn't even want to clean shit out of my kid's hair. I don't know. Medical professionals, like
No,
especially nurses,
it's next
they
level.
don't get enough credit.
They do not get enough credit, and it's kind of wild that there's essentially no ceiling for how you can be desensitized to stuff. Like I remember a big cultural shift after The Walking Dead came out. The first couple episodes, you see like half a zombie, and everybody was gasping. And by season 5, 6, 7, 8, you're just like not even batting an eye, eye at
Oh yeah.
people swinging a barbed wire baseball bat at each other. But I think that would be significantly tougher when it comes to dealing with a human body. And I wonder if it is something like I've listened to some like interviews with law enforcement officers who say they're not trying to be a dick, but you have to like instill some humor into some disaster situations, otherwise they just can't cope with it, and like that is their
Yeah.
coping tool. So I imagine when like your job is literally just like taking in remains, it's got to be twice as bad, right?
Yeah, and now that I think about it, like all of the morticians that I've met have had super dark humor. And they are strange, but not in like a bad way. Like they're just like different. Like they see things differently
For sure.
than some of the other people that I've met. And it's probably because, I mean, number one, their profession, but I think personality has a lot to do with that too. I don't know.
It's kind of wild
Yeah,
too
I definitely couldn't do it.
yeah, that industry would still be like kind of, taboo, that like, they kind of separate off into their own like tribe and college because, nobody wants to associate with, the people who deal with dead people all day, when like we literally all die, at least most of us. Like, there's,
What do you mean most of us?
I mean, if you don't, I mean, you get pretty famous. But I mean, Jeff Goldblum, fingers crossed. Meryl Streep, fingers crossed. They haven't died yet, so I have very limited evidence to apply to those populations. But odds are most people are going to die, so maybe you want to be nicer to your local friendly neighborhood undertaker. Just a little suggestion. Bailey, question for you: Have you ever been in a cadaver lab? And I'm not talking about like a frog. No.
No, I've never been to a cadaver lab. Have you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I studied biology for a number of years, and I'll tell you what, the most interesting thing is the rules around, like, at a community college I was at. I assume this is the rule everywhere, like, cadavers had to be behind 2 layers of doors. One for their, like, it could be biohazard stuff, but they said kind of the implicit, like, between the lines thing was they had to, like, mitigate the risk of people who didn't want to take physiology classes from seeing a human corpse because they didn't want to, like, traumatize people, So there had to be 2 sets of doors, and then as soon as you walked in past that, they had a tub of Vicks VapoRub and some Q-tips, so you'd like
to put under your nose.
And then you just rub that under your nose, which it says right on the jar not to do that. But I mean, you get a sniff of those cadaver labs, and you're like, I don't care if this is gonna give me Alzheimer's or something. I don't want to smell it.
Why were you in that class?
For fun.
What?
I'm so kidding. I was studying biology. They make you dissect things. This was in college.
Okay, yeah, I dissected a freaking frog.
This was in college.
Like, this is higher education. You don't do baby frogs anymore.
That was in college. All you had to do was a frog.
We're gonna cut up a human.
Oh my gosh, we had a pig brain, or a fetal pig, and a sheep's brain. I think I had a cat, and that was very, very sad. It showed up like mostly skinned. Yeah. It was like a frozen cat, which also, side note, apparently costs $6,000 if you want to get like a pre-frozen science cat. They're very expensive. And then some stuff, with like human cadavers.
You think you could ever get one like freeze dried?
Human? No, but like probably the cat.
Yeah, like the cat.
Are you in the market?
Like
I know a meat processing plant back in my hometown, Hillsboro. They might be able to hook us up.
Oh my god. Okay, so tell me, did you ever cut into a human then?
Plead the fifth.
No, I'm not judging. I'm just genuinely curious.
I mean, once or twice. I mean, it's just part of the process.
Interesting.
Yeah, you really need to, because I mean, there's so much that's illuminated. Like, you can look at texts as much as you want, but like there's things about the human body you don't really realize until you're cutting into it, like how thin some muscle walls, like tissue walls, are. The fact that like all organs are basically in like a gross sack. They're not just like shoved back there behind your like muscle. There's just random like fluids everywhere all the time. Like everything's basically like suspended in liquids if it's doing well, if it's healthy tissue. Tendons are like, some of those are like trying to cut through metal. There's all kinds of stuff to it. I mean, freaking nerves. You think of nerves as like this magical little microscopic, like, electrical impulse carrying thing. And some of those, like even like branching off right after, your spine, they're like as big as your pinky. Like it's an actual big structure. So it's enlightening. It's also very creepy, like the first couple times you do it.
No, so I've never been to a cadaver lab, but I did go to a Body Worlds exhibit. Have you heard of that before?
I've heard of it. I've never been.
Yeah, so I'm not sure who does this, like who is behind this, but it is real human bodies that have been meticulously dissected and preserved through an innovative process. There is a controversy behind it because they're not really sure that all of the bodies in the Body Worlds exhibit have been donated to science. Because I think there were some claims that the some of them were prisoners,
Oh my gosh.
and like some of the victims' families said that they did not give consent. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. It was basically it's like they take the human body and they made it an art exhibit and a science exhibit all in one. So I remember walking in and they literally have a human body completely without skin, and you can see all of the muscle. They had one guy who was extremely obese, literally cut in half, and you could see like the amount of fat in his stomach, and it said like how much that section weighed. Like that stuck with me. They had a human brain that had been sectioned off and like kind of like fanned.
Sure.
It was extreme, and the saddest part of all of it was that like there were also like embryos like in the different stages, so that was like kind of difficult
Sure.
to kind of see. But it was very interesting to me because like you would have to be so careful and have such a steady hand, especially to like as you're scraping everything away from the veins or like even just the nervous system. Like they had a whole nervous system just like visible, and it just looked like tree roots. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember looking at it and just thinking like that is so freaking cool. Like
You
that's so cool.
own
Like
one
that's
of
inside
those.
my body.
Yeah, you literally
yeah, I
have
own one
You're
of
like,
those.
this is the coolest thing ever, and I freaking have one.
I have it, but I'm not going to cut myself open to look at it.
For sure,
you know?
for sure, for sure. I'd advise you not
So,
do that.
yeah, nobody do that. Please and thank you.
Absolutely.
So,
No messaging that we give should be prescriptive or thought of as health advice in any capacity. And if you have questions, you should seek
No.
out a medical professional or a local mortician.
yeah, that's true. Okay, so back to the mortuary students. So they are also subject to disease. As morticians sometimes work with infectious cadavers, an element of risk is inherent, though considered remote if recommended precautions are followed. They are also subject to formaldehyde exposure during embalming procedures, but that is avoided with strict health regulations. Emotional stress can take a psychological toll on mortuary science students as well. Students report the strongest reactions when working with the bodies of children. The emotional and mental strains account for a high dropout rate among mortuary science students.
I could imagine.
that was,
I could imagine that too. Especially, I don't know what the like median salary is for this, but if you don't have like, I'm sure it's not like relative to like a neurosurgery or something. So if you're told you got to go through all of this, you're being put in those traumatic imagery situations, and you don't even have like a golden brick road at the end of the tunnel. Like I could understand a high dropout rate.
Yeah, and I just did a quick Google search here. The average mortician gross salary in Illinois is $65,000.
It's not bad.
Or an
Extremely
equivalent-
aggressively medium.
Yeah, it's an equivalent hourly rate of $31, which some truck drivers are making that starting out.
Yeah.
So
No.
Yeah.
I would go on the record. I would not do this for $120,000. Like,
oh no.
no. So
yeah.
tip your morticians, people. Honestly,
Yeah.
leave them in your will. Just like 2% of your estate or something to the undertaker. I think would be very nice.
Yeah. Or if you have a terminal illness, you could just swallow a bunch of money. So then when
A
they go
little
to,
surprise, a little Easter egg.
here's your tip. Okay,
That's
okay.
wonderful.
Okay, so moving on to the necessary skills. And I'm not a mortician. All this information was gathered online research. So if you're a mortician and you're listening to this and you're thinking this is a bunch of shit, I'm sorry. I did my best. And you're also welcome to write in or, let us know if anything is inaccurate or if there's anything that you wanted to share about your experience as a mortician. But to be a successful mortician, you'll need to combine various skill sets. To prepare the deceased for funeral and burial, you'll need a thorough awareness of human anatomy. You'll also need to know the processes of restorative art, as well as have skills with cremation and burial preparation. A strong business acumen and understanding of business law is necessary for the smooth and professional management of a funeral home. Because dealing with the bereaved is a large part of the job, skills in grief psychology and counseling are mandatory. You'll also have to be really good at playing the board game called Operation.
No. Oh my gosh. Restorative art though. So this is like, again, there's so many like little facets to this that I haven't thought about because like, I mean, you could have some bodies coming through there if you're doing an open casket, like where you're gonna have to whip out like the Bondo. You're gonna have to get the real deep wrinkle fillers, Like I'm thinking like if somebody had like a head injury or something. Like
I'm almost wondering, and I didn't Google this, but you just kind of made me think about this. If they use prosthetics at all, if there's like a head wound and the family wants an open casket and, makeup's not going to cover it, I wonder if they'll do that or if they would just recommend closed casket.
Imagine just saying, in my professional opinion, we should keep the box closed, which I'm sure does happen.
We'll talk about it later on, but that's what they did with Abraham Lincoln, and he had a head wound. So moving on to embalming, which I kind of touched on earlier, but we're not going to go too far into embalming because it could be an episode by itself. Like there's literally so much out there on it. So embalming dates back to Egyptian times. Mummifications were widely practiced in Ethiopia, Peru, China, Tibet, and the Canary Islands. Cultures had different methods for embalming, as well as different religions and reasons for embalming, or why they would not practice embalming. For instance, Europeans did not practice embalming or perform mummifications primarily due to Christian beliefs. However, when it was practiced, it was specifically utilized for scientific and research purposes, as most people were interested in learning about human anatomy and how it worked. While many civilizations practiced embalming around the world, many of the significant scientific advances that affected modern embalming occurred in Europe. Let's look at a few key breakthroughs, as mentioned in Funeral Basics, which is one of the many sources that I used for this episode.
Sounds like a really bad
Quote,
sorority, but go on.
Oh my God. Quote, a strange moment in embalming's history relates to the body snatching era, commonly associated with the UK because of two infamous body snatchers, William Burke and William Hare. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there was a shortage of legally acquired bodies to dissect and study. At the time, anatomists could only use the bodies of convicted criminals for study, and without proper preservation, the bodies became unusable after a short period. Thus, the body snatching era was born.
I hate this. Go on.
When medical schools were studying human anatomy, there was a shortage of legal bodies available for research. This created a black market opportunity for resurrectionists or body snatchers who would steal recently buried bodies and sell them to medical schools. Although this was a profitable business, it caused much pain and suffering for the families of the deceased. As a result, some families hired guards or installed metal crates or gates to protect their loved ones' graves. At the time, a dead body was not considered anyone's property, which is why its removal was often only a misdemeanor. However, dissecting an illegally acquired corpse came with heavier consequences. This meant that both the body snatchers and the medical professionals would face consequences if discovered. End quote. And the reason why I included both of those paragraphs is because I was like, this is all written extremely well. I'm just going to quote the whole thing.
Might as well.
And yeah.
Okay, so there's some alarming content in this right here. Number one, I get very peeved like when somebody swipes my Amazon package. Can you imagine if somebody freaking steals your wife? Like,
Oh my
and not
gosh.
just at like the bar or something. I mean, like out of the ground. Like somebody rolls up and steals grandma. They're building metal
But also-
cages in the ground to prevent people from. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but like also this would have been okay, the 18th century. They didn't have any like
Refrigeration
tools
or
besides
anything.
a
obviously.
shovel?
Oh, that's true too.
so you're think of how long it would have taken to dig up if they were burying 6 feet deep.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I also wonder like what's
Right?
the intersection like with I know grave robbery was a big-ish thing back in the day, where they dig people up for jewelry, or I've even heard like for like gold teeth and things like that, depending on how
Yeah.
times were. But it sounds like times weren't that rough if they had a shortage of legal bodies because they had to be criminals, so they just had a shortage of crime. That sounds pretty nice. But hey,
Yeah, there you go.
hey, you know what? Then you catch a body snatcher. That's a crime. And hey,
Yeah.
that's one more body for science.
That's true. Okay, so how does embalming fit into all of this?
I don't know. Let
Well,
me know.
Essentially, okay, let me tell you. Essentially, 2 things occurred to end the reign of body snatching. First, the Anatomy Act of 1832 allowed for the legal donation of unclaimed bodies, as well as donating your own body to medical research. Second, in the 1880s, embalming was introduced as a method for preserving bodies for medical research. This had a huge impact because it meant that a cadaver could be studied for months rather than just days. Together, these 2 changes effectively ended the body snatching era. Now society focuses more on keeping your body snatched.
My gosh.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, as one would imagine, there were varying degrees of success. Eventually, through the independent work of Frederick Reusch, William Harvey, Jean Ganal, and William Hunter, scientists discovered a successful way to adopt arterial injection as a means of preservation. This practice continues to this day. In the early days, arsenic was used as a preservation agent. However, in 1859, Russian chemist Alexander Budorov first synthesized formaldehyde, which eventually replaced arsenic as the main preservation chemical. So that's about all that I'm gonna touch on for like chemicals and embalming.
Absolutely. We're already kind of getting in the weeds. Was that last guy's name albuterol? Like
Albuterol.
Like-
Albuterol. Yeah, okay.
albuterol. I can't even say that.
Can you say that in Carl's voice from Jimmy Neutron?
Albuterol.
Okay, thanks.
Jimmy's
so-
mom has a body. That wasn't very good. I'm sorry.
Can you say Jimmy's mom is looking snatched?
Jimmy's mom is looking. Jimmy's mom is looking snatched. For real, no cap, Jimmy.
All right, we're good. Okay. Another quote from Funeral Basics. Quote, while embalming for medical study did exist, it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln died in 1865 that it became a widely accepted practice for funerals. Following his assassination, Abraham Lincoln's body was embalmed, and he laid in the state in several key cities before journeying to his final resting place. During this period, he was viewed by thousands of citizens who remarked on his lifelike appearance. For many, it was the first time they'd seen an embalmed body, and not long after, the practice gained popularity. End quote.
So,
According to the Smithsonian... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Abe accomplished a couple of substantial things during his career. One of, not the most notable thing, but one of would be popularizing chemical preservation. So I've never heard that attributed to Honest Abe, but
I know, right? I didn't know anything about this until I like started looking it up, which is crazy. The Smithsonian Magazine had this to say about Lincoln's death. Quote, upon the death of Lincoln's 11-year-old son, Willie, in 1862, he had the boy's body embalmed. End quote. His assassination took place 3 years after this, so it makes sense that his body was also embalmed. The article also states, quote, while we do not have statistics on the increase in embalmings during this time, there is ample evidence that the Civil War had a profound effect on how Americans treated death. Victorian mourning traditions gave way to funeral homes and hearses. Local carpenters and taxi servicers began offering funerary services, and undertakers earned certificates of training from embalming fluid salesmen. Eventually, every American could be embalmed, as most are today. End quote.
well, lucky
And
for us,
I know,
for us. But what is that conversation where Lincoln meets his untimely demise, and they're like, well, that embalming job looked so good on Willie. I mean,
yeah, right.
it's just sad.
So you and I had talked about this before, not on this episode, of Abraham Lincoln's head. He was shot in the head, right? And
right.
he had an open casket
For sure.
and
So,
was
like,
embalmed,
how
and
did
everyone's looking at
Yeah,
him.
how did they navigate that? That can't have been pretty.
Yeah. So I Googled when Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head, did they just cover his boo-boo with his hat?
He just pulled
This
his
is what I got.
hat down low. What'd you get?
And this is what I got. Okay. Not much. So I got not much is basically what I got. From what I could find, the bullet did enter his head, and they said that it did paralyze him, and he passed away shortly after. But he wasn't killed instantly. So if I take a second to think about this, like, most likely what happened was it was like it grazed or was near the top of his head, probably, which is super dark and sad. But that would make sense if it was, because then they could just cover that with his hat.
Yeah, just give him the old comb over, and just send him on his way.
I still can't believe that, though. Like, yeah.
Can you imagine he tours across the country, and then 4 to 8 years later he's doing another tour, but this time in a wooden box that's not a carriage?
I can't.
Man, that's guy
super
could
dark.
not stop touring. He was a man of the country, and man, hats off to Lincoln. Top hats off to Lincoln.
So essentially, all of these people are now being embalmed, and they are basically capitalizing death. And because of this, families could no longer bury their own, because more was needed than the assistance of just friends and family to, like, have a small visitation in your house and, like, take the corpse to a cemetery somewhere. So as a result of this, the cost of burying the dead went way up. The median cost of a funeral and burial, including a vault to enclose the casket, was just over $8,000 in 2014, which 3 decades before that was like $2,700.
Sheesh.
So I don't know what it would have been in, like, the early 1800s. Or I'm sorry, the late 1800s, early 1900s, because that's kind of like when all this happened. But, like, even now, I'm sure it's got to be at least 20 grand. It's got to be at least 20
That's
grand.
horrifying. And on the bright side, it's something that's probably good to prepare for, but I mean, if you don't, it's not really your problem.
Sure. Yeah, just everybody, like, in your family.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But man, I'm interested to see how the price of funerals tracks against inflation, because this is starting to seem like an appreciating asset. I'm not really sure how you invest in passing away, but, I want in on this game.
Yeah. And okay, so here's like a Bailey thought. I kind of went down a little rabbit hole thinking about this. In the 1800s, before all of this took place, you would bury your own family members.
Sure.
Right? The idea of having a dead family member in my house is just completely foreign to me. I cannot even imagine what that would be like. Like I've hated even burying like my own pets growing up. And I feel like if you were allowed to have pets as a kid, we all have like a really traumatizing gerbil, hamster, or guinea pig story.
Sure.
But also bodies start to decompose like within 24 to 72 hours, right? So I was just curious and I looked up the body decomposition timeline.
Oh my gosh.
And this is what I found, which my search history is absolutely wild.
Oh, you're on some lists now for sure.
I probably am.
If you were not already.
Okay, so I found this guy. His name is Dr. Arpad A. Voss. He's a senior staff scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and adjunct associate professor at the University of Tennessee in forensic anthropology. That was very long.
That's a heck of a business
Thank
card.
you, Dr. Voss.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Voss.
Yeah. According to Dr. Voss, human decomposition begins around 4 minutes after a person dies and follows 4 stages.
You could still get resuscitated after 4 minutes. Like
I know. Right? Crazy.
I'm going to eat some more preservatives because that freaks me the heck out. But go on.
Yes. Okay. So autolysis, bloat, active decay, and skeletonization. Decomposition begins within 4 minutes of death. 24 to 72 hours after death, the internal organs start to decompose. 3 to 5 days after death, the body starts to bloat and blood-containing foam leaks from the mouth and nose. 8 to 10 days after, the body turns from green to red as the blood decomposes and the organs in the abdomen accumulate gas. So I imagine burials would happen rather quickly, even 200 years ago, simply because of the decomposition rate. Like you had mentioned, like cadavers smell. Okay, well that's like
frozen and preserved and the fluids drained.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't even imagine. And all I can say is years of exposure to Taco Bell has prepared me for that bloat phase. I feel like I've been through that. So I hear them. I see them. I do know what they're going through 72 hours after death. Because you get a couple gorditas in me, and I'll start to have some, organ decomposition, some bloat for dang sure.
There you go. So, yeah, I just thought that was super interesting. So kind of tying back to funeral directors now, when did the titles change for people who dealt with dead bodies? Well, the first undertakers were woodworkers, furniture makers, and carpenters that had the skills required to make a coffin. In rural areas, if they had a horse and cart, they also provided transport. Although with most people dying at home, friends and family often carried the coffin to the local churchyard. There's some discrepancy in when the first time the term funeral director was used, but from what I could gather, it was somewhere between 1895 and 1901. According to the Smithsonian Magazine, quote, in 1895, the trade magazine, The Embalmer's Monthly, put out a call for a new name for the profession in the U.S. to distance itself from the title undertaker, which was a term that was then perceived to have been tarnished by its association with death. The term mortician was the winning entry. End quote.
Heaven forbid the funeral industry be too closely associated with death. Well, I don't get this at all. And who gave this magazine the authority to just upend the whole industry? That's kind of wild.
Yeah, right.
Also, I literally thought you were going into a bit because what was the title of this publication?
The Embalmers
That
Monthly.
does not that does not sound real.
No, it doesn't.
My daddy got in trouble because there was a Maxim in the mailbox. Oh,
Oh my god.
you know what magazine I got under my mattress?
The Embalmer
Embalmers
That was
Monthly.
real nice.
Real nice. I got some pictures in there.
Yeah. So, the whole time that I was looking up like funeral director title, I kept thinking of like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where like he's just like hitting a bell or something. He's like, ting, bring out your dead. And then they just like throw him out. Yeah. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Probably unrelated.
It
whatever.
probably was like that. Short straw, if you're just like you just want to make cabinets and they come rolling up with dead bodies and they're like, hey, can you make a box for this? Like, you're not asking for that.
Yeah.
What you wanted to do is make furniture. You're just trying to make a wagon out there, and they're bringing grandma. They're bringing the dead grandma to your doorstep.
Oh, no.
You're like, oh.
Although back then, I'm sure they were all just trying to make enough money to not like die of scurvy.
Fair enough.
Scurvy's probably way too early.
Maybe so. I don't know.
That's probably like 1600s. I don't freaking know, Ethan. So we're going to go from the history of funeral director title into funeral processions. So the funeral procession was marked by the movement of bodies, both living and dead, and the loud noise that it generated. The more wealthy and famous the deceased was in life, the flashier the funeral procession would be with mimes and musicians. For the poor, perhaps only a few flute players would play music at the procession. Professional mourners formed a large part of the procession. These were women who were not members of the deceased family and had to be paid to participate. According to the accounts of funerals, they would wail loudly and literally rip out their hair and scratch their faces in mourning. A large number of professional mourners signified that the deceased was a wealthy and powerful individual.
Okay, did you just say rich people had mimes in their procession?
Yes.
Pantomiming what? Like doing an impression of the deceased? Like Lincoln's walking through and they're just like going like vaudeville with their hat, just like taking it on and off, like kicking a heel out dramatically, like what? Right. I can't.
Like the Wally dance.
Yeah, mimes. Oh my gosh.
Oh man, I don't know. But I was reading this and I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. But I was curious if like being a professional mourner was still a thing. So I Googled it and it
on Indeed
is.
It is
On Indeed. It is still a thing. It's not as popular. I found this website called cracked.com and I'm not sure how reliable it is, but there were some other articles on it where they were like legit stories on there. So, the one article that I did find, they interviewed a guy who's a professional mourner in London, and he discussed having to do like research on the deceased to make up stories with other people at the visitation or funeral to make it more believable. He makes himself cry and everything else an actor does to make it believable. He makes anywhere between $30 to $60, which isn't even that much, in my opinion. And anyway, this was his telling of the worst experience. So, quote, "By far my worst funeral, one in which I had already refused to pretend to be a naval officer, complete with uniform, was being run by a relative who kept coming to us during the bloody funeral to tell us what to do. He'd whisper, 'Cry harder,' or 'moan louder,' which are things that nobody wants to hear at a funeral, or in any other setting if you think about it. It finally got so bad that it sounded fake, and a fellow mourner cried so hard that her eyelids swelled to the point where she couldn't physically see to drive to the reception." End quote.
Oh my gosh.
All very strange and absolutely ridiculous. But I promise I'll hire somebody to fake cry at your funeral
I
if you want.
I appreciate that immensely. I've got to be honest. I pulled out my phone. I opened LinkedIn. I just typed in mourners, see if there were any openings near me. Uh, there are not, but it said you might, if you like this, you might be interested in recreation specialist for the U.S. Army.
What?
I don't want to know.
Shut
I
up.
don't want to know.
Oh no. That's so weird.
My gosh, so professional mourners, they are still out there. They're not unionized, they're not pulling big bucks, but hey, if that's something you're interested in, or if you've just got too much hair and you're wanting to pull some of that out to make a scene, this might be a thread worth pulling for you.
There you go. Hey, that might even pay more than like shopping for Instacart or DoorDash.
Yes,
Not gonna lie.
seriously. And I mean, I don't have an exact figure, but across the country, like the United States, several people are passing away every single day. So, like, you don't have a guarantee as a DoorDasher that people are going to want lunch every single day. But you can bet your you can bet your bottom dollar somebody is going to pass away.
Okay, but imagine like actually hiring a professional mourner and being so serious about it. Like
Like,
at
not
that
as a
point, it's
joke.
not about the dead person. It's about what other people think of you.
Oh, for sure,
and that
for
is
sure.
just so gross. Yeah,
I don't
it's so messed up.
I wonder how many people arrange for a mourner before they pass away, or if it's just people trying to protect their reputation, like posthumously or something.
I don't know. That'd be a good question. Yeah, so we're gonna end the episode on sharing any weird visitation or funeral experiences. So I have a story, but I wasn't sure if you had a story, Ethan.
For funerals specifically?
Yeah, or like just anything strange
Oh,
that happened at.
yeah, absolutely. I've been to some heartbreaking toilet side vigils for some passed away goldfish. And I mean, when I think a lot of parents, their strategy for introducing kids to the concept of death is through pets. Like you mentioned earlier, you have a pet. It passes away, and you say, well, sometimes things just die, Jimmy. And I hate to break it to you, but a goldfish in the wild's gonna live 46 to 47 years. They live forever.
No.
Yeah, look it up. Goldfish live forever. And the only reason the goldfish passed away is because you're keeping it in a can of like Campbell's chunky flavored soup, and you're feeding it fruit flies out of your mom's oranges or something like that. And they're not gonna live. What'd you come up with?
What?
Yeah.
The average lifetime of a goldfish is 10 to 15 years. The longest lived goldfish on record lived to age 43.
Yeah, so there we go, like right in line with what I'm saying right there. So like it's kind of an instrument to instill a lesson, but it doesn't make it any less sad, especially when you're a kid. Like I remember when my first goldfish passed away and we like dropped it in the toilet. I was crying buckets of tears, and they were falling right into the toilet, which caused the water level to get so high that the toilet flushed automatically. And I wasn't ready.
You are full of
I wasn't
shit.
ready. I wasn't ready to
You are.
say goodbye. So that's probably
Okay.
one of my worst funerals that I've been to. I also remember getting started on funerals for humans very, very early in life, and just being disturbed, like when they tell you. And I'm gonna say, I don't want to make like too much broad strokes parenting advice. Don't make your kid go up and pay their respects to the body, like if they're freaked out. Because I was scared out of my socks. Like I barely my fish had just gone down the drain into heaven. And
Yeah.
they're like, you need to go pay your respects to the body. And I'm like, I don't want to do
And
that.
you're
And they
like,
say, you
"What?"
have to. And you go up and you're like, oh my gosh, they don't look alive. I'm not sure they're okay.
No, and it's like, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like as a kid, you don't really process any of that stuff, and then they just like throw you in. I had something similar happen. I was a little bit older. I was probably 11 or 12, and I had a great aunt pass away who lived up in Wisconsin, and I didn't know this at the time, but there was like a whole side to my dad's side of the family that was in Wisconsin that I had just never met before. And so I got to meet like cousins my age I'd never met. So that was kind of cool. But we made the 5, probably 7 hour drive, and we get to the funeral home and we're standing in line at the visitation. And my mom's like, when you get up to the casket, don't like say anything out loud. And that's all she said. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's just like, you'll see. Which I freaking hate when people do that. Like, you can't just like give me a warning and then be like, oh, you'll see.
Yeah, shivers. Go on.
So I'm thinking like she's gonna have a weird face, or she's gonna have like a mole like in the middle of her forehead, or she's gonna have a unibrow, like whatever. I don't know. I was a kid. I didn't know what to expect. So we get up to the casket, and her mouth has been sewn into a smile. And it's literally because you use like a lot of muscles in your face to smile. Okay.
This isn't real,
but it was
is it?
just like the corners. It was just like the corners. And I looked at my mom and I'm like, what the hell? And she was like, yeah, I'll talk to you about it later. So that day I learned that it's a family tradition on my dad's side to have the mouth sewn into a smile when someone passes away.
Oh my freaking, they sprung this on you.
Yeah, literally no warning, and it has stuck with me my whole life. Like, I haven't been to like too many visitations or funerals, like I can recall all of them,
Sure.
but it was just so weird. And I actually asked one of my friends, her name's Lydia,
if she would
she's
make
a
sure that
mortician,
your smile
and I
gets
asked
sewn
her,
up
like,
when you die.
No, I asked her if that was like common, because I remember like seeing that and just thinking like, this is so freaking weird and creepy. Like, you're dead, you're not smiling. No. Like, and she said that it is something that people can request to have done.
Flipping way.
But that it's not common.
Okay. But the fact that they've like heard of it is kind of disturbing to me, but
yeah.
I've never heard of this.
Which I'm sure it's something that's covered in like mortuary school. They probably have to teach it then, but it's probably just not something that's requested very often.
I don't.
So
that's some like Heath Ledger stuff right there. I like, why so serious?
Yeah, let's put a smile on it. Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. Well, no, that could mess you up right there. Okay.
Yeah, super weird.
That's wild. But no, seriously, when you pass, I need to I'm just like taking some notes to make sure your, will and testament is recorded in an audio format, but like, do you want the smile sewn onto your face?
Absolutely not. And if you do that, I will haunt the shit out of you. So.
Challenge accepted, champ.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for listening, guys. That concludes the first episode of Niche Knowledge and Nonsense.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I hope that this podcast just sewed your smile right up into a grin. And join us for the next one. I promise it's probably not going to be as scary as embalming, but, disclaimer.
No, but we are hoping to have another episode where we get to interview a mortician. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, fingers crossed right there. And until then, have a good night or morning.
See ya. If you've made it this far into the episode, I just wanted to say thank you for listening all the way through. I hope you learned something new, and if you enjoyed your listen, please leave us a review wherever you're listening. You can also send us an email at nicheknowledgeandnonsense@gmail.com. Special thanks go out to Eric Sferro for letting us use his song Cherry Crush for the intro and outro on our episodes, and also for the support we've received from friends and family. Thank you guys, and make sure to look for a new episode every 2 weeks.